All right, guys. This will be my third time trying this. First time I did it 1:30 in the morning. I'm trying to do it on PowerPoint, and evidently that didn't work. So let's hope you're going to be able to see the PowerPoint as we go through it a little bit. Hope everything's going well with y'all as we start our second week of I don't know what you want to call this. Uh, Anyway, hope things going well with you. I think we've got assignments for most of you. Try to keep up with it. I'm going to send out some suggestions and really making things work in how to do this maybe in a better way. So something we're all learning. I know I'm learning new ways. I'm learning how to be scheduled in a way that I haven't been. So let's go ahead and get started. Hopefully you see the title. We're going to start on 10 Commandments of Dating. What the heck are they? Well, Moses had his 10 commandments, and we're going to have ours for dating. We've said in the past that the Bible doesn't ever talk specifically about dating, but what it does talk about, it gives us principles for relationships. And so we've broken those down into 10 different principles that apply to dating relationships, and we're going to go through those. We're just going to go through the first three today. Start out small. Tomorrow is going to be a review day for a quiz. And then Wednesday, we've got a quiz. I'll have that up on Moodle for you. And it'll cover the first three commandments, plus the stuff we talked about last week, purposes of dating, the video, the verses on dating, such as those things. We do have a Zoom session tomorrow, just as a way to touch base and for you to ask any questions that you have, to take care of any concerns. All right, let's look at the first commandment. Hey, first commandment, get a life. What exactly does that mean? It's really an issue of priorities. That at this stage in your life, dating should be way down on your priority list. If you're a Christian, your number one priority is your relationship with God. If you are not a believer, then your priorities are going to be your family, school, work, etc. Even for a Christian, there's a lot of things that would come before a dating relationship. I mean, let's face it, it's a long time before y'all are going to even get married, even think about getting married. And so you don't want to sit there and put too much emphasis on those dating relationships. How do you know if you are? One, if you're the kind of person that you always have to be in a dating relationship, that's not healthy. If you feel like you have to be and you can't feel good about yourself unless you're in a relationship, that's a problem. That's an unhealthy thing for you to be in. Second thing, if you are in a dating relationship and you're losing some of your other friends because you never get around them or never see them, or your friends say, how come you don't ever do anything with us anymore? That's another problem. It says you're putting too much time into that dating relationship. And at this stage, that's just not a healthy thing. At this point, you really want to be focusing on developing the qualities that are going to make you a good partner someday. A lot of things come before this dating relationship right now. And the problem is when people have so much invested in that relationship and that becomes their priority and the most important thing to them, a lot of times they end up compromising on certain values when that happens. So first commandment, hey, get a life. Make sure that everything in your life doesn't just revolve around dating. Hey, second commandment, use your brain. If you remember when they asked Jesus, what's the greatest commandment? He said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. God gave us a brain to think with. Use it. Maybe we're talking more to the ladies here, because I think, ladies, you have a tendency, at least more so than guys, to really make decisions based on your emotions and not based on sound reasoning and principles. Now, everybody's not like that, but let's just say in general, women do. Guys tend to make decisions more. Normally, it would be based on logic and reason, but unfortunately, when it comes to relationships, sometimes those decisions are made based on hormones. Both of them are dangerous things. Hey, emotions come and go. They're not always going to feel the same. Some days you're really going to like somebody, someday you're going to be in love with them, the next day you're not. You don't want to make decisions based on something that's so up and down and inconsistent. Same thing for guys. Don't make decisions with your hormones. Hey, use the brain that God gave you. Use the principles that God gave you about relationships. We talked about a lot of those last week. You looked those up in your verses, talked about them on the video. God gave us those principles so that we could have solid, healthy relationships. We mentioned last week, it is possible, I think, to date in such a way that really honors God, but I think you got to be careful with that. And one of the key things in that is living your life by principles, maintaining your freedom. We'll talk more about that. And not being ruled by your emotions. It's a dangerous thing, especially in a dating relationship. You find girls that compromise because they feel in love and they do things, especially physically, more than they ever intended to. On the guy's part, hey, they just get ramrodded by hormones, and suddenly they're not thinking straight because all they can see and want is one thing. Don't let that happen to you. And finally, the third commandment today is, hey, be equally yoked. Now, we've already talked before about marriage. That concept of equally yoked is really, it's about that, hey, you want to be with somebody who has the same goals, values, going the same direction that you do. For a Christian, any other religion, someone of their same religion. But last week we looked at verses and we said, hey, it's not enough that just somebody calls themselves a Christian. Hey, I've known both guys and girls who weren't believers, but faked it just so they could get in a relationship with someone that they knew was a Christian and they knew they needed to. That's an unhealthy relationship. We're going to talk later on about this idea of missionary dating, the idea of you going out with somebody, quote, to lead them to Christ. No, that's not good. It's deceptive, it's unhealthy, and it's not something that you should be doing. If you're a Christian, you ought to be dating Christians. If you're not a Christian, date someone else who's not a Christian. But then we said more goes than just the label Christian. There's a lot of hypocrisy. Paul says, hey, find somebody who lives like it. He talked about certain things to stay away from. Stay away from people who have a really bad temper. Stay away from somebody who there's moral issues that are inconsistent with them. Various other things. Talked about the things to look for. Somebody who's passionate and really searching for God. That's the kind of person that you want to find. Now, when we talk about dating relationships, we talk about two different roles in that. Guys, God's called you to be a spiritual leader. Girls, God's called you to be a spiritual challenge. Now, obviously, I'm talking to believers right here, because if you're not a believer, you really don't even care about this aspect of it. Let's go on a little further to talk about what does it mean to be a spiritual leader. And then I'll talk a little bit about what it means to be a spiritual challenge for you girls. This thing gets through with its curly cues. Hey, guys, understand this, and ladies, you need to understand it well. To say that a guy's the spiritual leader in the relationship, it's not the same thing as the authority a husband has in marriage. God has given the husband authority as head of the household, as the husband, as the father. You don't have any authority over someone you date. They don't belong to you. They belong to God. They belong to their father. They belong to their future spouse, which is probably not going to be you right now. Anytime you start trying to think you have that right to tell someone you're dating what to do, you're out of line. Ladies, you don't need to put up with that. A guy's role is not to tell you what to do. He's to lead you in the way that God's called him to. Hey, guys, you need to set the pace in the direction of the relationship. We're talking about a relationship that honors God, one that stays emotionally, spiritually, and physically pure. And you need to know that's the direction. We said some of the goals to glorify God, to build your relationship with Christ, to learn to practice agape love. That's how you need to see the dating relationship. And you're the one who sets the pace. You're the one who can decide, hey, where are we going to go? What are the things we're going to do? What are places we shouldn't be going? What are the things we shouldn't be doing together? But guys, you need to have a clue before you're ready to date on what kind of a dating relationship you're going to have. Hey, next thing, guys, you need to make sure there's clear boundaries established. Now, both of you need boundaries in your dating relationship. And I believe that you ought to be able to talk about them with each other to make sure they're the same kind of thing during that talking phase. You find people that have different boundaries, you're going to run into trouble. Guys, set up clear boundaries, especially, and let's face it, the biggest struggle you're going to face is with physical temptation. Set up appropriate boundaries. We'll talk about those later. Now, just remember what a boundary is. A boundary is something that gives you direction. It's something that sort of establishes the playing field. It's there in relationships, in driving, and everything else to really protect you. It's like a double yellow line. You don't want to pass on that. It's a good chance you're going to hit somebody head on. Well, you want to set up boundaries to protect your relationship. Boundaries dealing with how much time you spend together. Boundaries dealing with the places you go. Boundaries dealing with the physical limitations you're going to have. You need to honor those, even if the girl you're dating pushes you on that. Guys, ultimately, it's your responsibility to make sure the relationship stays where it should be. In talking about being a spiritual leader, we follow the example of Christ, the idea of the servant leader. 3 things that I think you ought to look at. One is prayer. And the kind of prayer I'm talking about is just a simple, casual prayer. One, I think both of you ought to be praying about your relationship. Paul tells us to pray about everything, pray without ceasing. But I think you ought to open up every day in prayer and pray, God, protect us. I think you ought to end the day and say, God, thank you. It's a great boundary and sort of accountability thing there. I think you need to be having conversations about spiritual things. Talking about things that matter, things that last. We spend so much time talking about things that don't matter. And let's face it, we talk about things that are most important to us. And if you're a believer, you ought to be talking about that. How's God growing you? What are some areas? How are things? What are issues that you can talk about? And then finally, obviously, church ought to be a part of your relationship. Whether you go together, whether you go separately, maybe sometimes one goes to the other youth group, but you need that. If you're a believer, you need the church, you need the accountability, you need someone to encourage you to grow. And God says this idea of, hey, I'm a Christian, I don't need church, that's not biblical. Guys, remember, the ultimate thing is that idea of being a servant leader. It's a great way to practice agape, to do what's in the other person's best needs, to be unselfish, to always put her needs ahead of your own needs. Ladies, what does it mean to be a spiritual challenge? Well, let me just give you a story that I think illustrates it. I probably shared parts of this before. I think I've said before how disciplined my wife is in her quiet time with God. Every morning, she starts her morning off in scripture and in prayer without fail. She's the most disciplined person I know in that regard. That challenges me. It challenges me to be a leader that way. It challenges me at my own walk. Ladies, you want to have such a passion and desire for, one, a godly guy to date. You ought to have a passion to grow in your relationship with God. And that ought to be so evident that it pushes the guy you're dating to become that spiritual leader. So both of you have roles. Guys to be that spiritual leader, girls to be that challenge to push them on towards that. And that's the first of the 10 commandments. Those are the first 3. Let's sort of go back over those. Hey, get a life. Make sure that dating is not your highest priority. Use your head. Make decisions with your brain, not your emotions. And finally, hey, guys, be that spiritual leader. Girls, be that spiritual challenge. That goes into that whole concept of being equally yoked if you're Christians. All right, guys, we'll get back to this later on the week. Don't forget, tomorrow, I'll send an invitation to you. I think I already have, maybe. We got a Zoom meeting. Hope you just drop in just to say hello. If you got any questions, we got a quiz on Wednesday. And I'll be putting that up on Moodle on Wednesday and let you know exactly the times that that'll be open. All right, guys, talk to you later. Bye.